The Grand Priest raised one finger. Goku's body vanished before the sound of his own breath could leave his throat. No explosion followed. No flash crossed the heavenly realm. Only a blank space remained where Kakarot had stood one heartbeat before. Vegeta stared at that empty space. His knuckles split under the pressure of his fist. Blood slid down his fingers. It fell into the cracks beneath his boots. The drops were small. They landed without sound. They left marks in the marble. These marks spread outward like cracks in old porcelain. The 12 gods of destruction remained on one knee around him. The divine records above the throne pulsed with pale light. Countless threads of blue snapped at once. Inside each broken strand, an image of Goku disappeared. A child with a tail vanished from a mountain road. A warrior in orange vanished from Namek's burning sky. A father smiling beside his sons vanished from Earth's sunlight. A fighter standing against Jiren vanished from the tournament of power. Every version dot, every memory dot gone in the same breath. Gohan's eyes widened. Those memories flickered inside his skull. He reached for them like a drowning man reaching for air. His father's voice became distant. His father's smile blurred. His father's name stayed sharp. Only pain held it in place. Gohan gasped dot. He fell to one knee. Piccolo caught his shoulder. It happened before he hit the floor. Bulma pushed herself to her feet, her face twisted with grief and fury. He saved you, Dot. No God answered her. He saved every single one of you. Still, no God answered. Vegeta's fist closed at his side. His glove tore under the pressure of his fingers. A line of blood slipped between his knuckles. The Grand Priest finally turned his gaze toward Universe 7. Emotional resistance is expected. Attachment will fade shortly. He lifted one finger toward the divine records above Zeno's throne. The erased mortal's influence will be removed from all living memory within 12 divine minutes. A pale ring opened above the heavenly realm. 12 symbols burned around its edge. One symbol cracked. It turned black. A thin sound spread through the air. It was like a clock made from glass. Krillin stepped back, his face drained of color. What does that mean? Whis lowered his eyes. It means the universe will stop remembering him. Goten shook his head. His voice came out small. No, Dot, I know, Dad, Dot, the second symbol cracked. Goten's fingers loosened around the torn edge of his ge. His brow furrowed. He looked down at the orange cloth in his hand. Confusion passed across his face like a shadow. Trunks saw it happen. He grabbed Goten by both shoulders. Say his name, Dot. Goten blinked. Dot. Trunks shook him once. Say your dad's name. Goten opened his mouth. No sound came. Dot. Gohan's breath broke inside his chest. Kakarot. Dot. Vegeta's voice cut through the silence. He had not moved from the place where Goku vanished. His shoulders remained still. His eyes remained fixed on the empty air. Kakarot. Dot. The name fell from him like a blade. The third symbol cracked. A pulse moved through the realm. It was not energy. It was not destruction. Something older, something that lived beneath both. Small cracks opened beneath Vegeta's boots. A faint red glow leaked from them. Beerus noticed it first. His eyes narrowed. Vegeta. Vegeta did not answer. The Grand Priest looked toward Beerus with a sharpened gaze. You permitted this mortal to approach divine thresholds. You permitted him to challenge beings beyond his station. You permitted rivalry to become a ladder. Vegeta slowly turned his head toward Beerus. Beerus did not meet his eyes. That refusal reached Vegeta faster than any accusation. The Prince of Saiyans understood it at once. Beerus would not fight. Whis would not fight. Zeno would not reverse the law. The gods had already accepted Kakarot's death. The fourth symbol cracked. Far away on Earth, Chi-Chi dropped a bowl in her kitchen. She placed one hand against her chest. She knew something had been ripped from her life. She could not remember what shape it had. Back in the heavenly realm, Vegeta's shadow stretched across the broken floor. Something ancient moved inside his blood. Something older than Ultra Instinct. Something older than destruction. The gods had buried it before the first universe learned how to burn. The fifth symbol cracked. Gohan lifted his head. His eyes burned with grief. It could not find a target. He was my father? The erasure tightened around the name. Gohan's face twisted. Piccolo stepped in front of him. Stop this, Dot. The Grand Priest looked at Piccolo. The weight of that gaze drove a fracture through the floor beneath Piccolo's feet. Piccolo did not step back. His cape snapped behind him. His fingers curled into claws. The Grand Priest's voice stayed soft. Namekian intervention is irrelevant. Piccolo lunged. Dot. His body crossed the distance in a green flash. Whis raised his staff without looking. A clear barrier appeared in Piccolo's path. Piccolo struck it with both fists. The barrier did not move. The impact threw him backward across the broken marble. He landed hard. He coughed once. He tasted blood. Gohan caught him. Piccolo. I'm fine. Piccolo pushed himself upright. His hands shook. I'm fine. Whis lowered his staff. Visible pain was in his eyes. I am sorry. Vegeta looked at Whis. Whis held the look for one moment. Then he lowered his gaze. The sixth symbol cracked. The silence changed. It no longer felt empty. It felt hungry. The erasure was not finished with Goku. It was feeding on every bond. These bonds had carried him through existence. Vegeta's grief did not come out as tears. It pressed inward. It compressed beneath his ribs. It became heat. It became weight. It became something older than language. The floor beneath his boots split wider. The red glow darkened. Black light curled through it like smoke moving underwater. Bulma saw the blood falling from his fist. She saw the strange darkness forming around his boots. Vegeta. He closed his eyes for one breath. He opened them. The blue in his pupils looked colder. I told him. The words barely moved the air. No one interrupted. I told him he would not die before. Bulma covered her mouth. Vegeta's jaw tightened. That clown never listened. The seventh symbol cracked. Goten's eyes went blank for a full second. Trunks shouted his name. Goten swayed. He grabbed Trunks' arm. Why am I crying? The question broke something inside Gohan. He turned away. He could not bear the sight. Vegeta heard it. His fingers flexed. More blood fell. The red glow beneath him surged. A low pulse moved through the heavenly realm. The pulse did not feel like K. It did not feel like destruction. It felt like a heartbeat buried under creation. The divine hierarchy had never been designed to recognize it. Beerus rose halfway from his kneel. The Grand Priest turned his gaze toward him. Beerus froze. The command needed no words. The ninth symbol cracked. Only 3 remained. The Grand Priest extended his palm toward Vegeta. Prince Vegeta. You are experiencing residual attachment. It will end. The crack beneath Vegeta spread in a perfect circle. Black-red light climbed the broken marble. The light did not shine. It swallowed the brightness around it. The angels shifted. Mojito's fingers tightened around his staff. Cuss stepped back by half a pace. Was breathed in slowly. Vegeta took one step forward. The heavenly realm groaned beneath his boot. The 10th symbol cracked. Bulma suddenly forgot the sound of Goku laughing. She grabbed her own hair with both hands. Gohan forgot the weight of Goku's hand on his shoulder. He dropped to both knees. Vegeta took another step. The darkness followed him. The red veins in the floor spread outward from his feet. The gods of destruction leaned away. Champa swallowed hard. Belmod's painted smile vanished. Beerus stared at Vegeta. It was as if he saw the Saiyan race for the first time. The Grand Priest raised 2 fingers. A white seal formed in front of Vegeta. It was Angelic Law made physical. It was dense with the authority of creation. Vegeta walked into it. The seal struck his chest. His body stopped for a fraction of a second. The realm held its breath. Then the seal cracked. A sound like breaking bone echoed across heaven. The Grand Priest's brows lowered for the first time. Vegeta looked at the broken seal on his chest. He looked back at the Grand Priest. The 11th symbol cracked. Only one mark remained bright. The divine clock screamed without sound. The last minute had begun. Goku's name trembled at the edge of every mind. Bulma whispered it again and again. Gohan dug his nails into his palms. Goten sobbed without understanding. The Grand Priest extended his palm. You will kneel. Vegeta stopped walking. His head lowered. His hair cast a shadow over his eyes. For one terrible instant, the gods believed it. They thought the command had worked. Bulma's breath caught. Gohan looked up in despair. Beerus' shoulders dropped. Then Vegeta laughed once. It was not loud. It was not joyful. It sounded like a blade being drawn from stone. His head lifted. His eyes had changed. A red line burned across each pupil. It was not the red of Ultra Ego. It was not the red of rage. This was the red of something older. It predated those words entirely. The line spread outward like blood entering water. The black-red light under his boots erupted through the floor. The heavenly realm split in 4 directions. The final symbol above the throne began to crack. Vegeta raised his bleeding fist. The crack stopped. Every divine being felt the interruption. The erasure resisted him. Vegeta resisted harder. His blood struck the floor one last time. The drop did not fall into the marble. It sank into reality itself. A pulse tore across the heavenly realm. The angels stepped back. The gods of destruction lowered their heads by instinct. Zeno leaned forward for the first time. Vegeta's voice came out low and cold. Do not touch his name. The empty space where Goku had vanished flickered. A faint orange spark appeared inside the void. Vegeta's shadow rose behind him like a living eclipse. Something ancient opened its eyes inside his blood. The gods had never written it into law. The Saiyans had carried it before they learned how to kneel. The Grand Priest's calm face finally changed. A thin crease formed between his eyes. Whis whispered from behind his staff. This power. His voice faded before he could finish. The Grand Priest moved. He did not speak a command. He did not summon a seal. He simply vanished from the throne platform. He reappeared with his palm already driving toward Vegeta's chest. The impact struck like a collapsing star. Vegeta flew backward. His boots carved twin trenches through the marble. He hit the far wall of the heavenly realm. He punched through it entirely. He fell into the open dark beyond the platform's edge. It was the lightless gulf beneath heaven. No divine record had ever described anything worth naming there. He fell, not for long. His Kai caught him 300 meters below the platform's edge. He floated in the void. His armor was split across the chest. Blood drifted from his hands into the empty dark below him. He looked up. The Grand Priest stood at the edge of the platform. No expression. No urgency. He looked down at Vegeta. He looked the way a man looks at something that has fallen. It had not yet understood it should stay down. He raised one finger. A second seal descended. It was larger than the first. It burned white. It was carved with 12 layers of law. They were packed so tightly that the light between them had been compressed into something almost solid. It struck Vegeta with the weight of divine architecture. His ribs cracked under it. Two of them, by the sound, maybe 3. He fell another 150 meters. Then he stopped himself again. One hand was braced against the underside of the platform's broken edge. Gohan lunged for the edge of the main floor above. Piccolo caught him with both arms. He hauled him back hard. There is nothing below that edge. If you fall in, you do not come back. He is going to. Look at his face. Gohan looked. Vegeta was bleeding from the chest. His shoulder had torn through the armor. His broken ribs would be grinding against each other with every breath. He floated alone in the void beneath heaven. He had no ally within reach. No god was willing to intervene. His face carried a flat, cold certainty. He was a man who had already decided the outcome of the fight, not the outcome he hoped for. The outcome he had calculated and accepted. He began to climb, not with flight. He drove his fist into the stone of the heavenly realm's underside. He pulled himself upward, hand over hand. It was the way a man climbs a cliff face when the path has been taken away. His knuckles split against the divine stone. His burned shoulder screamed under the effort. Every pull dragged his cracked ribs across each other. He did not stop. The Grand Priest watched him climb. He waited with patience. It was the patience of something that had watched the beginning of every universe. It expected to watch the end of each one. It was the patience of a being for whom time was not a pressure but a material. It was something to be shape. It was something to work with. It had never once worked against him. He watched for 3 full seconds. Above the platform, the people who had known Goku longest watched in silence. Krillin pressed his fists against the floor. He did not breathe. Master Roshi gripped his staff tightly. The wood creaked. Piccolo stood with his hands at his sides. His jaw was set because he understood. He understood in the way a teacher understands a student he has spent years watching. The man climbing the wall of heaven had made a calculation. It did not include survival as a priority. Only completion, only the specific task mattered. It needed to be done before anything else could. Bulma was the only one who looked away. Not because she could not bear to watch. She was looking at the orange spark, still flickering in the void above the platform. It was the barely there remnant of her oldest friend. She counted the symbols on the divine clock. She counted the distance between what Vegeta was climbing toward and the time remaining for it to matter. She looked back when the 3rd seal descended. Then he raised his palm. He sent a 3rd seal downward. This one was not white. It was colorless. It was the absence of permission. It was the architecture of law that predated the universes themselves. It was the kind of authority that did not need to explain itself. It had never been challenged in a way that required explanation. It struck Vegeta directly. The force was not explosive. It was structural. It pressed against him from every direction at once. It was not trying to damage him, but to define him. It aimed to establish a certainty of divine law. It stated he was a mortal body in a place where mortal bodies had no authority to be. Vegeta's climb stopped. He hung in the dark. He was held in place by a law that was trying to remind him what he was, his teeth pressed together. The muscles in his jaw stood out like cables under tension. His hands were still gripping the stone above him. He pulled Dot. The law pushed back harder. He pulled harder than it pushed. Slowly, he continued climbing. It was not in a burst. It was not in a transformation. It was not in any moment of sudden power. One hand Dot, then the other Dot, the law pressed. He pulled Dot. The distance closed by centimeters, then it closed by more than centimeters. Then it closed by the length of his arm. Finally, he was at the edge of the main platform. He pulled himself up over it and stood. The colorless seal hung around him like a second skin. It slowly cracked from the center outward. It cracked the way ice cracks when weight has been on it too long. He was breathing audibly for the first time in the fight. He looked at the Grand Priest. "You should have made the third seal stronger." "I made it from the same law that erased your rival," the Grand Priest replied. "Then your law was always weaker than you believe." The Grand Priest's expression did not change. He raised both hands. 12 angelic chains erupted from the floor. They erupted from the walls and from the air itself. They wrapped around his wrists and his ankles. They wrapped around his throat and his spine. A 13th chain dove into the ground. It bound his shadow to the floor. Vegeta's body slammed to one knee under the weight. The orange spark in the void flickered. Gohan felt his father's name shake inside his mind. He clutched his head. The erasure resumed its clock. Far away on Earth, Chi-Chi stood among broken dishes. Her hand was pressed to her chest. A name dissolved from her tongue before she could shape it. The Grand Priest stepped closer. Origin chains made for beings born outside divine permission. The chains began pulling something from Vegeta. Not his strength not his ki It was something deeper. It was the black-red darkness that had surfaced from the buried Saiyan Origin. The chains tore it away in strips. Each strip burned to ash as it left him. Vegeta's body convulsed. A sound escaped his throat that was not a scream. It was the sound of something buried being torn from its grave. It had been waiting under his skin since before he understood what he was. Beerus rose to his feet. The Grand Priest's gaze shifted to him without turning. A small seal appeared over Beerus's chest. Beerus looked down at it. The purple energy around his heart began to fade. This destruction force was as much a part of him as his breath. Whis raised his staff. A second seal locked his arm in place, mid-motion. The Grand Priest returned his attention to Vegeta. Every rebellion ends the same way. The orange spark shrank to a dying point. Vegeta's fingers loosened. Inside his mind, the erasure had finally reached him. Goku's face blurred. The first battle on Earth warped into smoke. Name's burning sky vanished. The Tournament of Power lost its final shout. His hand opened. The Grand Priest watched the loosening hand. At last but Vegeta's mind had not collapsed. It had fallen into a silent place. There was no heavenly realm there. There were no gods, only a battlefield under a red sky. It was the kind of red that comes before the star goes out. Everything below it has one last hour of warmth. A younger Vegeta stood alone among broken Saiyan armor. Every warrior around him had fallen. Every royal command had turned to dust. The planet beneath him trembled on the edge of something permanent. He had been there before. In dreams, it was the place behind his eyes. It was where battles went quiet enough for the old things to surface. A voice came from behind him. It was older than any god. It was deeper than any law. It spoke from the blood beneath his name. A Saiyan does not remember because memory is safe. Vegeta's closed hand twitched. A Saiyan remembers because the enemy wants it gone. He opened his eyes. The red in them had not faded. It had gone deeper. Past fury, past grief. It went into something that did not need either to function. It was the part of a person that remains when everything else has been stripped away. What is left is simply what they are made of. I do not need to remember his face. The realm fell silent. His bleeding hand closed around the origin chain at his wrist. I remember the weight. The chain cracked. I remember the fool. He stood in my way every time I wanted to move forward. The chain split. I remember the rival I chose. The chain around his throat shattered. The Grand Priest raised both hands. Every remaining angelic seal rushed toward Vegeta. They came in a wave of white law. Vegeta lowered his chin, and no god gets to take that from me. The black-red power erupted from his chest wound. Every angelic seal that touched him turned black at the edge. Then it turned red. Then it fell apart. The origin chains snapped one by one. The tribunal ring overhead recoiled from the shockwave. Vegeta rose from one knee. His body was wrecked. 3 ribs cracked. His shoulder torn through to the bone. Blood ran from his mouth, chin, and knuckles. He rose anyway. It was not cleanly. It was not easily. It was not with any grace. He planted his boots into the shattered floor. He looked at the orange spark flickering in the void. Goku's outline appeared inside it. It was faint and incomplete, but the divine clock was still running. The erasure was still in motion. The law would return. This would happen as long as the moment of erasure remained intact somewhere in the structure of time. Vegeta understood it without being told. He had torn through enough of reality in the last 10 minutes. He understood its architecture. He could not stop it by standing here. He had to reach the instant before the law was born, found his voice through the restraint seal. Vegeta. What are you doing? Vegeta turned toward the sealed wall of time behind the Grand Priest. He raised his bare hand. His answer was quiet. What he always does. His fingers dug into empty air. The air bled black and red. I am breaking through. He pulled time, screamed A, vertical wound tore open across the heavenly realm. Inside it, seconds flowed backward like burning glass. Vegeta stepped toward the wound. The tribunal ring fired every remaining chain at his back. He did not turn. The chains struck the darkness around him. He crumbled to ash. Gohan shouted out. Bulma reached toward him with both burned hands. Beerus stared with his mouth slightly open. Whis whispered the impossible truth. He is tearing time open by hand. The Grand Priest moved to stop him. Vegeta looked back once. His red eyes cut through heaven. You should have killed me first. Then he stepped through. The heavenly realm vanished. The world became a tunnel of shattered moments. Each second struck Vegeta's body like broken glass. His boots landed on fragments of time that had already died. They were pieces of hours that history had moved past without ceremony. The orange flame of Goku's existence burned at the far end of the tunnel. He closed his fingers around it. He kept moving. The Grand Priest's voice chased him through the wound, returned to the corrected sequence. A white spear of Angelic Law shot down the tunnel. Vegeta twisted his shoulder. The spear grazed his cheek. It drew a line of blood that floated backward into the past. It curled upward through dead seconds like smoke in still air. The walls showed Goku's life collapsing in reverse. Vegeta did not slow to watch. Every time the tunnel tried to show him something, he ran through the image. He did not stop inside it for the tournament of power. He ignored Beerus's purple sky. He ran through the Buu Saga's last desperate hours. Memory was the trap. The tunnel was built from memory. It wanted him to stand inside the images. It wanted him to feel the weight of them. It wanted to let the emotional gravity of each moment slow him to a stop. He understood that. He ran anyway. One moment found him regardless. Namek. The burning sky. The ocean boiling below. There was the smell of sulfur and ash. Saiyan soldiers used to say it smelled like victory. Vegeta had once agreed with that. Now it meant only one thing to him. His own dying hand reaching upward. Avenge us. The memory struck harder than any seal. His stride faltered for one full step. White chains burst from the walls of the tunnel. They locked around his arms. They were not physical chains or angelic law. They were the binding weight of a moment that had never been fully resolved. The Grand Priest's voice returned. It had changed. It was quieter now. More personal. The tone of someone who had studied a target carefully. Your identity is built on defeat. Everything you are was formed in the shadow of someone better. Your rivalry is not strength. It is a monument to failure. You have been building it your entire life. Vegeta's eyes narrowed. His red pupils burned deeper than they had before. It was not with anger. It was with the particular quality of attention a man gives to a statement that is almost true. Yes, he said. The chains paused. Every divine presence in the tunnel seemed to pause with them. I was defeated on Namek, Vegeta said. The words came out without heat or shame. They lacked any of the layers he had spent decades building around that particular truth. I asked him to avenge the people I could not save. The people I had failed to protect long before Frieza arrived. I was defeated and I was dying. The only thing I had left was a request. He pulled his arms outward. The first chain cracked, and then I woke up, and he had done it. I hated him for it. He managed what I could not. I spent years turning that hatred into fuel. It was the only thing I had that was strong enough to keep moving. The second chain split. That is not failure. That is the only honest thing I have ever done. I looked at someone better than me. I refused to stop. I refused to accept the gap. I refused to kneel to it. The third chain shattered. You want me to be ashamed of that? If I am ashamed, I stop. If I stop, the orange spark dies. Then you win, Dot. He looked directly into the place. It was where the Grand Priest's projection existed in the tunnel walls. I am not ashamed. I am grateful, Dot. He made me better every time he beat me. Every single time. I will never say that to his face. But I am saying it here in the middle of a tunnel made of broken time. I am saying it because it is true. The truth is the only weapon I have left that your law cannot touch. He ran through Namek's dying sky. He did not look back. Behind him, the chains had broken. They fell into the dead seconds of the tunnel floor. They became part of the past. It was one more thing the past was made of now. It was one more thing that had tried to hold. It had not managed it. The tunnel around him had changed. When he had first entered it, the walls had shown Goku's life collapsing in reverse. The images were vivid and deliberate. They were designed to slow him. Now the walls showed something else. They showed other Saiyans. Not Goku. Not himself. Others were there. They were faces he did not recognize from a time he had not lived. They were standing on red sky worlds. They were standing in the paths of things larger than themselves. They were refusing. They did not speak. They did not need to. He understood what he was looking at. This was what the gods had buried. This was what the Saiyan origin had been. The gods decided a race that would not kneel was too dangerous to remember correctly. They had not been destroyed. They had been revised. Their history was rewritten. Their nature was reframed. Their understanding of themselves was rebuilt from the foundation into something more manageable, into something that would eventually learn to kneel. It had almost worked. Vegeta looked at the faces in the walls. He ran through the tunnel. The heartbeat in his chest ran with him. The tunnel opened further ahead. He could feel the erasure point. It was the frozen moment. It was the instant before the law completed itself. It was close. He ran toward it with cracked ribs. Blood was in his mouth. The orange flame burned in his palm. A wall of divine script slammed down ahead. It was white law packed into solid architecture. It sealed the path to the erasure point. Letters, the height of mountains. Authority compressed into stone. Vegeta struck it with his shoulder. The impact threw him backward 15 meters. He landed on one knee. The orange flame nearly slipped from his palm. He caught it with both hands. He looked at the wall. He rose. He pressed both hands into the divine script. It burned his skin down to the bone. His blood hissed against the letters. The black-red power inside him surged through the wounds in his palms. It entered the law the way water enters a crack in stone. It went slowly at first. Then it went all at once. The script began to change. One character at a time. The white letters turned red at the edges. The red bled inward toward the center. The center held for a moment. It had the desperation of something that had been certain of itself for longer than creation. Then it bent. What are you doing? The Grand Priest's projection demanded, I am teaching your law my name. The wall pulsed. Saiyan blood spread through the divine letters like ink through water. The script contorted. The tunnel screamed. The sound had no direction. It came from everywhere time had ever existed at once. The wall tore open. Vegeta stepped through. The erasure point opened ahead. The heavenly realm appeared frozen in a single instant. It was the 1 second before the Grand Priest's finger completed its arc. The gods were statues in their places. Bulma had not yet screamed. Gohan had not yet lost breath. Goku stood unaware. He was 1 step ahead of where he would vanish. His weight settled comfortably into the casual stance of a man who does not yet know that something is behind him. Vegeta emerged from the wound behind him. His boots touched the frozen floor. Cracks spread beneath them, even through stopped time. The weight of what he carried was heavy enough to disturb even a moment that had been sealed. The orange flame left his chest. It moved toward Goku's body. It entered through the center of his back. Goku's outline solidified. The frozen moment trembled at its edges. Vegeta looked at Kakarot's back. For one breath, he wanted to grab him by the shoulder. For one breath, he wanted to tell him everything. He wanted to tell him about the erasure, the gods, and the 12-minute clock. He wanted to tell him about the falling, the climbing, and the tunnel of broken time. For one breath, he wanted to speak. He wanted to say he climbed back up from under heaven with 3 cracked ribs. He did it to keep Kakarot from being erased from history. He wanted to say he would do it again. Kakarot was never going to know the specifics of that. That was fine. He did not say any of it. The Grand Priest's finger began to move. Time resumed by a fraction. Vegeta stepped between Goku and the descending hand. Goku blinked. He sensed pressure behind him. Vegeta move a. What? Vegeta's voice cut like steel? Now. Goku saw the blood on Vegeta's armor. The red eyes. The wound pulsing in his chest. He saw the way Vegeta was standing. He was not braced for impact. He was already planted and committed. He had already finished making the decision. He had made it the moment the orange spark appeared in the void. His smile vanished. He understood this was not pride. It was a shield. Vegeta had turned himself into a wall. He stood between Goku and the law that had already erased him once. Goku stepped back. The Grand Priest's finger completed its motion. The beam of absolute erasure struck toward Goku. Vegeta raised his left hand. The beam hit his palm. The heavenly realm flashed white. Every frozen god lurched back into motion at once. Bulma cried out before understanding why. Gohan shielded his face. Piccolo planted his feet. Beerus' eyes went wide. Whis' calm shattered. It broke like the seal that had been holding his arm in place. The beam pressed into Vegeta's hand and stopped. His arm shook. The floor behind him split open in a straight line 3 meters long. The beam carried everything that had erased Goku. It carried the removal from memory and the deletion from time. It carried the judgment from the Grand Priest's throne. 12 minutes of erasure were compressed into a single point of divine force. Vegeta held it with one hand. Blood ran down his wrist. It fell from his elbow and struck the floor below. His fingers bent backward under the pressure. His cracked ribs ground against each other. His boots carved grooves into the floor as the force pushed against him. The wound in his chest blazed with black-red light. It pushed back against the white. The Grand Priest stared at him. For the first time in his existence, he did not speak. Vegeta slowly turned his palm. The beam twisted with it. The divine light cracked like glass under heat. It did not explode. It just fractured along lines of internal stress. These lines had always been there. They had never been found until now. The Grand Priest's eyes widened by a fraction. Vegeta's red pupils burned through the white glare. You killed him once. His fingers closed around the beam. The divine law splintered along its length. It split like wood grain split by something that understood the structure. You do not get a second chance. Vegeta crushed the erasure in his hand. The beam shattered into white fragments. They hung in the air for a moment like broken stars. Then they turned black at the edges. Then they fell at his feet like ash. It was the way all certainties eventually fall. They fall when they meet something they were not written to contain. The heavenly realm fell completely silent. The Grand Priest looked at his own hand. Then he looked at Vegeta. Goku stepped beside Vegeta, despite the warning. His face carried confusion. It also held something closer to awe than he would ever say out loud. Vegeta. What happened? Vegeta's attention remained on the Grand Priest. Later. The Grand Priest raised both hands. 12 halos of law opened behind him. Each one burned with the authority of one universe. Not seals. Not chains. They were halos. This was the final form of divine judgment. It was the weapon that had never needed to be used. Nothing had ever survived long enough to require it. It was the combined weight of creation's own authority. It was directed at a single point. Goku's aura flared behind Vegeta. Vegeta lifted one hand without turning. Stay out of this. You look like you are about to fall over. I said, stay out of this. Goku looked at the wound on Vegeta's chest. He looked at the cracked ribs, evident in the way Vegeta was breathing. He looked at the hands. They were bare now, and the gloves were long gone. The skin was burned and cut and still bleeding. He looked at the thing moving beneath Vegeta's skin. It had no name in any divine record. He understood what this moment was without any words. This was not their fight. It had never been their fight. Goku had been the reason for it, but Vegeta had been the one who chose it. That choice had been made alone. It was made in a place Goku had never been and could not follow. He stepped back. It cost him something to do it. He did it anyway. The Grand Priest released the 12 halos. They rushed toward Vegeta in a perfect circle. They moved at the speed of divine command. It was faster than ki and instinct. Each one carried the authority of a universe. Those universes had been standing since before mortals had words for standing. Vegeta planted his feet. His hair fell heavier across his brow. His red eyes locked onto the center. He did not dodge. He struck the first halo with his bare fist. The impact rang through his already broken hand. The halo broke. He caught the second with his forearm. It cracked against the bone and fell apart. He stepped through the third. He let it cut across his already torn shoulder. He closed the wound in the same motion. He used black-red fire that burned cold. he headbutted the fourth. The impact split the skin of his forehead. The halo shattered. The fifth struck his chest. It vanished into the primal wound like water poured into a drain. It was as if his body had already learned to consume this particular kind of law. The remaining 7 halos stopped in mid-air. The Grand Priest's fingers curled. He sent more force through the connection. He pushed the halos forward. The authority behind them had rearranged the structure of universes. Vegeta looked up at them. His bleeding hand rose slowly. The halos turned red. One by one, starting from the outermost and moving inward. They did not shatter. They converted. They changed their fundamental alignment. It was the way a compass changes when a stronger pole is nearby. The Grand Priest's expression shifted. His own laws had stopped responding to him. They orbited Vegeta now. They moved slowly, like a crown of broken judgment. It had decided on its own who deserved to wear it. Whis whispered one word behind his staff. Origin, the Grand Priest vanished from the platform. He appeared in front of Vegeta at full angelic speed. There was no hesitation. There was no preamble. His palm drove into Vegeta's chest. It had the concentrated force of all 12 universe authorities behind it. The impact burst across the floor in a shockwave. It cleared a 30-meter radius. Beerus hit one knee. Gohan tumbled and rolled. Piccolo came up with one arm raised to shield Gohan. His burned back reopened along the old wound line. Vegeta had been driven back 15 steps. His boot found the edge of a void crack. It was the same kind of void he had fallen into twice already. It was the lightless gulf beneath heaven. He stopped at the edge. He looked down into the dark. He looked back at the Grand Priest. He walked forward. The Grand Priest struck again. Faster this time, more direct. He was not correcting a mistake. He was ending a problem. His palm came in at an angle. It was designed to fold Vegeta's shoulder backward. It carried enough force to turn the joint to gravel. Vegeta caught the wrist. The same wrist. He had been blasted across the floor. He had been nearly driven into the void twice. Still, he caught the same wrist with the same hand that had been bleeding since the third seal. The grip locked the Supreme Angel in place. The Grand Priest pulled back with immense force. It was force that had once rearranged divine geography. Mountains of law and scripture were moved by that same motion. Vegeta held. His boots carved parallel trenches into the floor. The black-red darkness erupted from beneath him in a ring. The Grand Priest's eyes narrowed. He rotated his arm. It was angelic geometry. It used angles of force that mortal anatomy was not engineered to resist. It was the technique of a being who had studied every body type in existence. He understood how each one failed. Vegeta rotated with him. The Grand Priest twisted harder. Vegeta twisted harder. The angel's own momentum accumulated and worked against him. Vegeta used it. He pulled forward instead of resisting. He dropped to one knee to lower his center of gravity. He drove his elbow into the Grand Priest's midsection. He used every remaining unit of primal force his destroyed body could produce. The blow landed. The sound did not echo. It swallowed echoes. It was a single deep concussion. It rolled outward through every universe. It was not a blast. It was not an explosion. It was a note, the first note of something that had been waiting a very long time to be played. The Grand Priest folded over the impact. He tried to raise his free hand. Vegeta drove a headbutt into his face. He did it before the hand could form a weapon. The Grand Priest staggered. The silence that followed was different from every silence before it. Not stunned, not reverent. It was the silence of a category being revised in real time. A god of destruction had never made the Grand Priest stagger. An angel had never made the Grand Priest stagger. The combined force of every being present at the Tournament of Power had never made the Grand Priest stagger. One Saiyan, it was one bleeding, broken, mortal Saiyan. He had climbed back up from the void beneath heaven twice. He had run through a tunnel of broken time. He had pressed his burning hands into divine scripture and taught it his name. Vegeta followed the stagger. He grabbed the Grand Priest by the collar of his robes. He spun once to build rotational force. It was the way Goku always did. It was the technique Vegeta had criticized for being inelegant for 30 years. He had never once admitted it worked. Then he threw him. The Grand Priest flew across the heavenly realm. He crashed through the central platform. The throne above Zeno cracked down the center. Fragments of divine stone fell in slow arcs toward the broken floor. Zeno watched them fall with his head tilted slightly. His eyes held something no one in the heavenly realm could accurately read. Not fear, not anger, something older and more patient than either It was the look of someone who has been watching a very long story. They had just reached a part they did not predict. The Grand Priest rose from the wreckage. His robes were torn, his divine composure was gone. That stillness had persisted through the beginning of universes. It had lasted through the tournament of power. It had remained through every correction, erasure, and judgment delivered across the span of creation. For the first time in existence, the Grand Priest was covered in dust. He looked at himself, he looked at his torn robe, he looked at the dust on his hands. Then he looked at Vegeta. You are an anomaly that should never have existed. Vegeta walked toward him across the broken floor. His footsteps left cracks in the marble. They left blood on the stone. I have been called worse. The Grand Priest raised both palms. The origin chains reformed in the air. Every broken link was reforged. Every shattered seal was remade with the full authority of Angelic Law behind it. This was not a new technique. It was the original one. It was rebuilt from scratch. It was deployed without restraint. The chains launched 50, 100. It was more than that. Every chain the Heavenly Realm had ever used in its entire history was called. They were brought from whatever archive they had been stored in. They were summoned at once. They filled the air like a cage being dropped from heaven itself. Vegeta stopped walking. He closed his eyes. Gohan saw it. His heart stopped. Vegeta, move. Bulma's breath caught. Vegeta. Krillin covered his face. Goten grabbed Trunks' arm. Piccolo said nothing. He understood what was happening. He did not want to say it out loud. The chains hit. They wrapped around Vegeta's arms. They coiled around his legs. They locked around his neck, chest, and waist. They drove through his shoulders. They anchored to the floor. 100 divine chains pinned the Saiyan prince. They pinned him to the broken marble of the heavenly realm. The Grand Priest's voice returned to its usual calm. It ends here. He walked toward the immobilized Vegeta with measured steps. The angels did not move. The destroyers did not move. Goku's hands closed at his sides. They opened again, then they closed again. He took one step forward. The ground beneath Vegeta's feet turned completely black. Not dark, not shadowed. It was black. It was the color of something that existed before light was invented. It was the black of a place that had never been illuminated. The gods had decided this long before the first universe was numbered. They had decided that illuminating it would be dangerous. The chains stopped moving. The Grand Priest stopped walking. Every chain, all at once, had stopped pulling. The links held. They did not tighten. They trembled in place. The trembling became vibration. The vibration became a sound. It was low and vast. It was coming from everywhere at once, from beneath the heavenly realm, from beneath the universes, from beneath whatever foundation the universes had been built upon. A heartbeat, the Primal Saiyan heartbeat. It was the one that had beaten in Saiyan chest. It beat there before the gods decided to bury the origin of the race. It carried in the blood of every warrior born under a red sky. These were warriors who had stood in the path of something larger than themselves and refused to move. It was the one that Vegeta's ancestors had used. They did not use it to ascend toward the divine. They used it to drag the divine down to mortal ground. There, it could be held accountable for what it did. The chains cracked, not at the links, at the law written into them. The divine script inside the metal bent and split, character by character. It happened as the heartbeat rewrote everything it touched. The law did not fight back. Law cannot fight. It can only hold. It can only hold as long as what it was written to contain agrees that it applies. The Grand Priest raised his hands to reinforce the chains. The heartbeat pulsed louder. The reinforcement disintegrated. The chains fell, not broken, not destroyed. They let go. It was the way a definition lets go of a word. It happens when the word has become something the definition was never written to describe. Vegeta stood. The black-red darkness around him was not an aura. It was not a transformation. It had no name in any divine record. It had never been permitted to emerge before. It was the will of a people who had refused to kneel to anything. It was distilled through a single warrior. He had spent his entire life deciding what was worth bowing to and what was not. The Grand Priest stared at Vegeta. Vegeta looked at him. Between them, there were no chains, no seals, and no authority. Just two beings and the truth of what they were. The Saiyan race was feared before your laws existed. Vegeta said quietly. The Grand Priest's voice tightened. Your people were chaos. We preserved order. You preserved your seat. The words landed without heat. That was what made them cut. Vegeta took one step toward him. The Grand Priest did not retreat. He had too much history for that, but his hands did not rise either. You erased Kakarot because he climbed higher than your law allowed. Vegeta took another step. You erased him because you looked at a mortal reaching the level of gods. You felt fear instead of wonder. Wonder would have meant acknowledging the truth. It would mean the structure you maintain might not be the highest thing that exists. The Grand Priest's jaw tightened, and then you tried to erase every world that loved him. Vegeta's voice dropped lower. My wife, my children, his sons, you tried to erase every fool who ever believed in that idiot. They became better for it. His fist closed at his side. I am Vegeta, Prince of all Saiyans. I do not forgive. I do not negotiate. He crossed the remaining distance. The Grand Priest raised one final barrier. It was the last law he could call. It was the oldest authority in the divine hierarchy. It appeared between them as a wall of pure white scripture. It carried every edict from the first moment of creation. Vegeta looked at it. He drove his fist through it. The wall did not shatter. It did not crack. It folded inward. It folded the way paper folds. It folded the way certainty folds when reality has grown past it. The law bent around Vegeta's knee. It fell away from his arm in pieces. It hit the floor as nothing. His fist connected with the center of the Grand Priest's chest. It did not carry angelic power or divine energy. It did not carry any force that could be measured in a divine record. It carried consequence. It carried the weight of everything the Grand Priest had erased. Every name removed from history. Every world silenced for rising too high. Every warrior destroyed for becoming inconvenient. Every truth was buried because it was harder to maintain than the low. The Grand Priest was thrown backward by the force of everything he had done. It had been accumulating for longer than creation. It was heavier than he had calculated. He hit the far wall of heaven. He did not bounce back. He stayed there. He was not held by any chain. He was held by his own history. It had finally arrived at the same moment he was standing in. The heavenly realm shook from its foundations to its highest point. The divine records above Zeno's throne cracked open. They spilled every erased name across the sky in rivers of burning light. Thousands of them, thousands of histories appeared. The law had decided they were too inconvenient to remember. They burned in the air like stars returning from a darkness they had been forced into. It was not triumphant or dramatic. Simply present, simply returned, Vegeta stood in the center of the burning names. His wounds bled freely. His armor was gone. His hands were bare and red. They were still shaking from the force of the last blow. He had no aura. He had no form. He looked like a man who had fought through something no god had been designed to survive. He had survived it. It was not because he was beyond damage. It was because he had decided the damage did not get a vote. He looked like exactly what he was. The silence that followed was not the silence of awe. It was the silence of a system. The system was trying to understand what it had just witnessed. It was trying to decide what category to place it in. It was trying to figure out what law applied to it. It was trying to see whether any law applied to it at all. The angels held their staff. Their father sat at the base of the far wall. He was alive and diminished. He was covered in the dust of his own certainty. Their commands had dissolved. The invisible instructions had told them how to respond, when to intervene, and what to report. Those instructions were gone, not cleanly. They were gone the way a language disappears. It happens when the only people giving orders in it are no longer giving orders. The angels still stood in their places. They held their staffs by habit or by choice. For the first time in their existence, those two things were not the same. Vados turned her palms over slowly. It was as if she was checking whether her hands still belonged to her. Mojito tilted his head. It was as if he was hearing silence for the first time and finding it heavier than expected. Whis looked at Beerus. Beerus looked back. Neither spoke. What they felt was not entirely comfortable. Freedom rarely is. This is especially true for those who have served a long time. They have served long enough to confuse the shape of a cage with the shape of themselves. The gods of destruction sat on their knees by habit. One by one, they rose uncertainly. They were like men who had not stood unassisted in a very long time. Some looked confused. Some looked afraid. One or two looked something like relief. They tried to hide it, but could not entirely manage. Goku walked to Vegeta's side. He looked at the wound on Vegeta's chest. He looked at the blood. He looked at the exhausted, wrecked, still standing condition of the man beside him. Then he did what Goku almost never did. He stayed quiet, then he spoke. "You look terrible." "I know," Vegeta said. "Are you going to be All right? A pause. Eventually, Goku nodded. He looked at the burning names still pouring from the open wreckers. He looked at the restored universes steady in their orbits. He looked at the Grand Priest against the far wall. The Grand Priest was alive and present, and not going anywhere. He was carrying everything he had done inside him now, whether he wanted to or not. You could have killed him, Goku said. I know. Why didn't you? Vegeta looked at the burning names. Because I am not here to replace one tyrant with another. His voice was flat, not noble, not dramatic. He lives. He remembers every name he erased, every world he silenced, every warrior he removed. That is his existence now. Every day of it. Goku was quiet for a moment. That's almost crueler. Yes, a beat passed between them. Goku looked sideways at Vegeta. There was something he wanted to say. Anyone watching could see the shape of it forming. It was the acknowledgement that deserved to be spoken aloud. It needed to be said in front of everyone who had witnessed what this cost. Vegeta spoke first. Don't. Goku closed his mouth. I did not do it for gratitude, Vegeta said. I did it because the alternative was intolerable. Because you dying before me is not something I will accept. Goku held the silence for a moment. I know, he said finally. That's why it counts. Vegeta had no answer for that. He let it stand. Bulma reached them. She grabbed Vegeta's arm. When he did not pull away, she stood beside him and held on. Her hands were burned. Her voice was still raw from screaming. She held on with the grip of a woman who had watched her husband walk into the architecture of creation. He fought it alone for a reason she had always known, even when he never said it plainly. His free hand closed over hers. Gohan helped Piccolo stand. Piccolo's back was burned, and his armor was split, but he was upright. He looked at Vegeta with the kind of respect that does not announce itself. It is the kind that lives in the way you stand. You stand that way when you are near someone who did something you could not have done. You know it, and you do not need to say it. Goten ran to his father. He crashed into Goku. He grabbed him with both arms and said nothing. Goku put a hand on the back of his head. Trunks looked at Vegeta. Something passed between them. Neither of them were built to say it out loud. Trunks bowed his head once. Briefly, Vegeta looked away before the moment could become something that required acknowledgement. Beerus walked across the broken floor. His claws were at his size. His shoulders, for once, were not raised. He stopped in front of Vegeta. You did what I should have done years ago, he said. Vegeta looked at him. Not because I was too weak, Beerus said, because I was too comfortable. A long pause. I know, Vegeta said. 2 words. No forgiveness was announced, and no grievance was resolved. Just the acknowledgement of a truth that had been standing between them for a long time. Whether anything changed, because of it was a different story. It was unknown whether Beerus would be different or whether the trust between them would rebuild. Some things do not resolve cleanly. Honesty does not require them to. Whis stepped forward last. He stood in front of Vegeta and bowed. It was not the formal incline of a guardian to a god. A full, genuine bow. The kind that costs something. Thank you, Whis said. Vegeta let the words exist without answering them. Up on the cracked throne, Zeno had not moved. The Omni King looked at the broken seat beneath him. He looked at the river of restored names burning across the sky. He looked at Vegeta with his head slightly tilted. His eyes held something no one in the heavenly realm could accurately read. It was not approval or disapproval. It was not the casual erasure impulse that had defined every previous moment of his attention. Something older and more patient than any of those things. Then he smiled. It was the small, simple smile of someone who has been watching a very long story and has finally reached a part they did not predict. He did not speak. He did not need to. The balance had changed, not through law, not through decree, not through a throne surviving intact. It changed through one person deciding the cost of doing nothing was finally too high. Then he paid the cost of doing something in full. He paid in blood and broken ribs. He paid in the void beneath heaven and in a tunnel of shattered time. What followed was years away. That would include the new structure of the heavenly realm and the renegotiated compacts between the divine and the mortal. It would involve the long and complicated work of rebuilding trust between gods who had served under fear and the universes they were meant to protect. That was a different story. In the immediate aftermath, no one moved for a long time. The heavenly realm had stopped breaking, but it had not healed. The floor remained cracked. The sky remained scarred. The divine throne stood split down the center. Zeno sat calmly in front of the crack as if it had always been there. It was as if thrones were supposed to be split. as if the split was an improvement. The Grand Priest sat at the base of the far wall. He was not unconscious. He was not restrained. He was simply sitting there in the dust of what he had built. He had the weight of thousands of erased names pressed into his chest by the last blow. He was beginning to understand something for the first time in his existence. He understood the difference between order and control, between law and fear, between serving creation and owning it. It was not a pleasant understanding. It was the kind of understanding that changes a person. Changing is not comfortable. The Grand Priest had not been a person who changed in longer than any mortal system had been counting. The angels did not go to him. They stayed where they were. They looked at each other and had conversations without words. These are the kind that happen when a structure that held you together is gone. You are trying to find out which parts of yourself were the structure and which parts were actually you. Whis stayed near Beerus, not behind him, as he usually stood, beside him. It was a small difference. It was not a small difference. The gods of destruction had stopped performing their dignity. They were simply standing among the broken pieces of heaven. They were looking at a universe that had just changed its terms without notifying them in advance. Some of them would adapt quickly. Some of them would struggle. All of them would carry the memory of a mortal Saiyan prince catching the Grand Priest's wrist and holding it. That memory would be the new bottom of every comparison they made for the rest of their existence. Goku sat down on a fragment of broken platform. He looked at his hands and said nothing for a while. Then he looked up at the burning names still crossing the sky above him. He looked at them for a long time. He knew some of them. There were warriors from the Tournament of Power and people from universes that had been erased years ago. There were beings he had fought beside and against, and sometimes befriended, across a lifetime of impossible encounters. He looked at all of them. He felt the weight of what their disappearance had meant. He felt what their return meant now, even if it was just the memory and acknowledgement of them. He did not say anything about it. He just looked. This story ended here. Vegeta turned away from the throne. He walked toward the edge of the heavenly realm. He looked down across the restored multiverse. He felt Bulma's life burning in Universe 7. He felt Trunks and Bulla in futures no eraser could reach. He felt Kakarot behind him. He was alive, irritating, and exactly where he was supposed to be. His fist, still bleeding, slowly unclenched. The dried blood across his hand cracked and fell away. The Primal Saiyan power settled inside him. It was not gone, not sealed, and not transformed into something else. Simply waiting. It waited the way all real power waits. It waits quietly until it is needed again. Goku's voice came from behind him, low and warm. You know, I was going to save myself eventually. Vegeta did not turn. Unlikely, I had a plan. You never have a plan. I was forming one in the 12 seconds before your existence was erased from all of history. A pause? It was going to be a good plan. Something moved in Vegeta's chest. He did not have a name for it. It was not pride. It was not warmth. It was older and quieter than both. It was the feeling of a weight carried alone for a very long time becoming bearable. This was because the person who had always been on the other side of it was still standing. He did not turn around. Kakarot, yeah, do not die before me. A long beat. I make no promises, Goku said. Then I will make the promise for you. Vegeta looked up at the restored stars. You will survive long enough to lose to me at least once more. That is not generosity. That is a debt you owe. Goku laughed. The sound moved through the heavenly realm. It moved the way light moves through a room that has been dark for a very long time. It was not dramatic or triumphant. Just present, just real, just proof that something worth keeping was still here. The multiverse held. The stars burned. The erased were remembered. The living stood on their own ground. On the edge of heaven, one Saiyan looked out at the infinite dark between the stars. He felt no need to conquer any of it. He had already done the only thing that mattered. He had refused to let it disappear.